Welcome to Locala Podcast, everybody. I'm Lisa Anderson, your host and publisher of Locala Magazine, and today we have a special message from me. But before we get going, go ahead and subscribe and like this channel because there are going to be some great podcasts coming up this month. So what is this special message? Well, before we dive into that, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit of history about Locala Magazine, how we got started, and all of that good stuff in case you didn't know how this came about. In 2020, I was put on furlough like many other people across the country and possibly even the world due to the pandemic. And at that point, I knew I didn't want to just sit around and do nothing. So I decided to start a food magazine with a friend from up in Minnesota. We decided because she was in Minnesota, I was here in Locala, that we would make it a national digital magazine with print-on-demand copies. That magazine was called The Newsletter. And if you recognize the name, that's because there is a section in the Locala magazine that I named for that magazine, and it is also called The Newsletter, like you are chewing something, because it is all about food. So that magazine was a bi-monthly magazine filled with recipes and stories, tips and tricks and things. And we had writers from across the country. We did wonderful interviews. It was a great publication. In December of 2020, we decided to part ways, my friend and I, on publishing the magazine because I had decided to resign about 3 weeks into my furlough for personal reasons. And so my hobby of a food magazine quickly became my business overnight. So in December, I started thinking about where I wanted to really go with this business. And I decided to part ways with my friend who was helping me publish the magazine. And I continued publishing the food magazine on my own, for the next few months as I came up with Locala. So in June of 2021 was the last issue of the Newsletter because I realized there was no way that I could publish 2 magazines on my own because I was trying to do it at the time. So it was the last issue of the Newsletter and the first issue of Locala magazine. And I really had fun connecting with local people and trying to figure out exactly how I was going to make this story-centric magazine come to life. And if I'm honest, the food magazine was always about connecting people. It was about bringing people to the table, despite what their food preferences might be. It was about that conversation. And this time in Locala, I wanted to make sure that the conversation was actually the magazine itself. And that's why I went with personal stories, because if you connect the community with personal stories, you connect us as human beings, and we get to know each other a little bit better. As the magazine progressed and developed and got tweaked and all of that kind of stuff, and I became more and more involved in the business community, it really dealt with a lot of business professionals. Now, the magazine itself didn't always have business professionals in, small business owners. I did try to go ahead and add in other members of our community because I felt it was important, but a lot of times it did go with small business owners in our community, because what better way to connect to your community than having the community understand who you are as a person in your business? And not necessarily about what your business does, but who you are running it, why you're there, what your story was to get there. And it helps them kind of feel warm and fuzzy and why they should support you. So that's how the magazine rolled for, well, a little over 2 years. We are currently in our 3rd year of Locala magazine. We are on the August issue, and in September of 2022, we started this podcast. And we've been pumping out quite a few podcasts. It's been mostly once a week since we began. There's been a few times where we did every other week, tried that out a little bit, but it's been mostly every Friday we've been putting out a podcast for you here with extended content as well as podcast-only episodes talking to members of the Locala community. Now, in May of this year, I wound up having a small surgery. Nothing too big. It was a gallbladder surgery. And But it gave me time to sit and think. Now, here's where we get into small business ownership, and I think a lot of small business owners are going to connect with this. But I knew I was burnt out. And when I went into my surgery, I thought, I'm going to be home for 2-3 weeks recovering from this surgery. I figured that after about a week and getting off any pain medications that I might be on from the surgery, that I would be pretty bored with watching TV and playing games on my phone. To my surprise, that wasn't the case. I wound up not being able to think about even lifting up a book or doing anything that wasn't just sitting and zoning out. I realized at that point that I was not only recovering physically, my body was trying to recover mentally. I couldn't do anything other than just zone right out, play some solitaire on my phone, sleep, have the TV on in the background. I thought for sure I'd be reading books and writing curriculum and doing all these things that I had in my head that I wanted to do, and that just didn't happen. That's when I realized that I needed to start looking at my life in a different way. Now, we also had some things going on in our personal lives, and by we, I mean my significant other and myself. And it really made me start thinking that I needed to go back out into the workforce and let somebody else take over this publication and allow me to have a little bit more stability for our finances and just in general for my mental health. So that's why this special announcement, because this August issue is the last issue of the Locala magazine, and it is also our last month of podcasts. Now, that doesn't mean somebody else can't come in and swoop and buy the magazine and the brand and continue these podcasts and continue the magazine. I am going to be putting it up for sale, so we'll see if it sells and if somebody is interested in running it. But if not, I feel like the time has come for it to end. Oh, the brand is so strong. You guys have been such a wonderful audience. You have been wonderful, wonderful people. Every day I get messages asking to be a part of the magazine, to promote the magazine on their social media, to have them promoted. So I know you guys are watching. I know you guys are looking at our social media. I know you guys are reading these stories, and I hope they're touching you as much as I have been touched by so many of these stories from members of our community. It is really a great way to get to know the people that are here living, thriving, working, and trying to build a life here in the Locala community. However, my time of sharing those stories has come to an end. So I just wanted to reach out and say thank you to everybody, to let you know what was happening here so that we just didn't disappear and go poof and you're wondering what happened to Locala. Well, I wanted to make an official announcement and let you know what was going on. Now, please don't tune out right after this podcast because, as I said, we are continuing for the whole month. So there is a whole month of stories left to be told. And it is a wonderful month because it is all about food. The theme for the August issue is for the love of food. And I hope that you will come back and listen to all the people who are involved in the food industry here in Locala. We have bakers, we have chefs, we have a culinary teacher. So please come back. We have food trucks. It's just a food-centric, wonderful issue. And to me, it kind of feels full circle because I started with a food magazine and now I'm closing with an issue of Locala that's talking about the stories of the people behind those types of recipes and passion behind the food projects. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this month. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience, and thank you so much for being excellent readers and enjoying the magazine. I hope you continue to connect with people through personal stories, getting to know them in some way, and hopefully someone will take over this brand and continue sharing those stories. Thank you for joining us here on the Locala podcast. Once again, I'm Lisa Anderson, your host, and this is my final time signing off on the Locala podcast. I hope you come back and watch those final episodes here of the podcast where we focus on connections through stories.